A bigger question is whether to go asynchronous or synchronous. And this is a huge discussion. So the first thing I want to say is from Monday to Friday, from 11 till 1 and 3:30 to 4:30, at that Zoom room, instructional designers from the University of Regina are available to answer pedagogical questions. And this, if you want to have a more in-depth discussion about asynchronous versus synchronous, I strongly encourage you to go there. I'll show you our talent in a moment. But just for a moment here, you can look at this chart of pros and cons of each. And maybe my bias is showing here because I'm an online instructional designer for the most part. And I've been doing it for 11 years, and we have really found that online instruction, asynchronous online instruction, can be extremely effective if you do it correctly. It's flexible. You can work, and your students can work anytime you want and anywhere you want. And those of you who have families to work around, that's something to consider. Pacing. In a synchronous classroom, you're dealing with classroom management, housekeeping issues, interruptions of one sort or another. And that can throw off the pacing of your teaching. Whereas in the asynchronous thing, you plan your chunks of teaching very efficiently in an organized way. And organization is extremely important. And again, you can talk to our ID talent about how to organize your courses. We can do it in our sleep in such a way that it won't feel like a dog's breakfast for anybody. It's also efficient. It's an efficient way to deliver information. Delivering content over Zoom or some synchronous platform like this isn't the best way to communicate information. By going asynchronously, you can record enhanced presentations. You can edit them and get them right before you send them out. You can assign readings. You can post text lectures. You can do podcasts, all sorts of things to get that content to your students in an efficient manner. There's less anxiety, as we all feel this in these live performances with the Zoom platform. As they said, it has all of the psychological stresses and none of the psychological rewards of actual face-to-face contact. Synchronous construction, asynchronous instruction, as I'll talk about, can be done very simply. There's a straightforward method for doing it that it just seems to really work. Accessibility issues are less. Things like Tom's problem today tend to occur less in the lower tech media that we use in asynchronous. And then personalities. In some synchronous meetings, certain people's personalities tend to dominate the room. And that can sometimes be counterproductive. In the asynchronous environment, it's the quiet, deep thinkers who get a chance to have a voice, and it can really enhance the learning that goes on in the class. Of course, the con is isolation. We believe is what you should use your synchronous platform for, is to break down the feeling of isolation between you and your students and amongst the students themselves. So rather than using the live platform to deliver your content, use the live platform to connect people as best you can. Disengagement can occur if you don't activate that social component and if you don't give them frequent prompt feedback. They'll tune out quite quickly if you let your grading and your feedback loop stretch too long. Another thing is to do an asynchronous properly, it does take some advanced prep work. But the advantage to that is then when it's time for class, you don't have to walk in and lecture for 3 hours. So it's a different expenditure of time. It's much more upfront. Now, actually, a mixture of synchronous and asynchronous teaching is probably the most dynamic and the most effective for your students. Moving on to synchronous, which, as I said, is a very good way to balance your asynchronous teaching, as you'll see, to bring in the social factor, which is very important for students. Synchronous instruction using remote teaching methods. Human presence can be an advantage, but not in a very, very large class. Trying to connect in a human way with, say, 100 students sitting on a Zoom screen, probably without their faces showing to save bandwidth. And God knows what they're actually doing behind their webcams while the video is turned off. They could be playing Angry Birds for all we know. It's not a great way to connect with large groups of people. However, you can do some responsive instruction, whereas in the asynchronous mode, if you're teaching, say, a concept that then is necessary to understand concept B, and concept B is required to understand concept C, there's kind of no way of checking in midstream whether or not concept A and B have both been mastered before you present concept C. Whereas in a synchronous mode, there's a possibility to catch when the instruction's going awry. The students are not understanding it for some reason. They can ask questions in the chat or by raising their hand and things like that. So for, where you're directing the instruction, teaching them nested concepts like that, it can be effective. Also, if you're teaching in a way that involves social constructivism, whereby concepts are manufactured or created by the discussion that takes place amongst people, then it can be a place for dynamic discourse, but you'll probably have to learn how to use breakout rooms to do that effectively. The cons are kind of like the opposite of the pros for asynchronous. It is inflexible. Students have to be, you have to be there at a certain time for a certain length of time, regardless of their part-time job situations, their family situations, their cat deciding to walk onto their lap while they're in class, and so on. And that goes for you as well. Now, we've all felt the anxiety, and God knows I'm feeling it right now, of presenting in this seminar. It's just a lot simpler to do it on your own time, so to speak. Less anxiety inducing. We've heard about Zoom fatigue. People are getting tired of learning and meeting through Zoom. So I guess the suggestion, if you're tired of something, do less of it, but don't eliminate it altogether. Inefficient, it can be inefficient due to interruptions and technical issues and things like that disrupt the flow of your smooth, well-considered instruction that you can do in an asynchronous situation. And some of these interruptions might involve personalities in your class, although you can address that through very frank statements in your syllabus. And actually disrupting learning for other students is an academic violation, so there is that recourse too for any personalities in your class who are making your instruction less efficient. One problem though is inaccessibility. We are receiving lots of reports of students not having the necessary devices to properly learn synchronously, or they don't have bandwidth. And so those are things to consider. So I guess that gives, I hope, a fair balance, which I admit I struggle with a little bit because my world has been asynchronous for 11 years, and I've come to very, very deeply believe in it as a way to teach effectively, yes, even to large groups of students, by making good use of the forums and your teaching assistants. I hope this all helps. Have a great day, everybody. So this is our team of people who sit in that room twice a day, Monday to Friday. If you contact us with a pedagogical question, it makes our day to help you out.